This is Jacob. Welcome to Polysophical. Today I have with me a very good friend of mine, a research mentor, a former professor, someone who I have looked up to for a long time, and I'm very excited to talk with him a bit about his life and what it means to be a well-rounded person. And are there conflicts between science and religion? So with us today we have Dr. Rick Jellen. Say hello to the camera, Rick.
Hi, everybody.
So again, thanks for joining us. And to start off, I'd like to ask how you became a plant scientist. Maybe a brief synopsis of what that journey was like and what it's like for you day to day. Because I think it's the forgotten hard science is the plant sciences. It's not often discussed, just out in the open or at school fairs and things like that. So I'd like to give people a window into what you do.
Yeah. So when I was young, I had a garden and I've always loved science and um, yeah, had broad range of interests, especially geography and history and those kind of things. And yeah, the more I looked at plants and especially different varieties of things like chili peppers, the more interesting they became to me. And so I just pursued that interest. Originally, I was going to be a doctor. I thought I'd go to medical school, but I fell off the wagon after introductory chemistry and decided that I wasn't maybe quite competitive enough to, didn't have that competitive part to driving me to be a physician. But I always wanted to do something that might be a benefit to mankind. So plant science and especially crop science became interesting to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have to say I went through a similar evolution, and I think a lot of people who get into the life sciences do that same thing where they enter in as pre-med and think I'm going to be a doctor. For me, it was shadowing the doctors and seeing the iron grip that the insurance companies had on how everything works. It was kind of a turnoff for me, and the private practice people that I went in and I liked what they did. They just said, "Yeah, this is kind of a dying breed," and that was really scary to me. So that was what turned me off to it. But I struggled through inorganic chemistry, and I probably nixed my chances just by doing that class, and it was hard. But anyways,
Just an insight into who I am and what my personality is like. After I changed my major from what was it before, botany or something, but with a pre-med kind of a outlook, I eventually majored in agronomy, a major they no longer have at my university at BYU.
mhm.
And I saw that those chemistry classes were in the curriculum, but just the psychology of taking them without having any pressure, because I knew graduate schools in plant genetics wouldn't be obsessing about my score in organic chemistry 351, but
Mhm.
taking it without that pressure, I did pretty well. So
Well, that's good. Yeah, what does that say? What does that say about, because I've done something similar in the past where I've had to retake a class and then it was like, well, I gotta get it done and it was just sort of almost more carefree and I did pretty well and that was just a funny experience to me. Huh, I guess it wasn't as hard as I thought. But something about the pressure, I don't know.
yeah, kind of a lack of grace under pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, but um something that is really, I think, admirable about you, something that I know about you that I think maybe not everybody who just has the opportunity to meet you in a class or in a meeting would understand is how well-rounded of a person you are and the wide, like you mentioned, the diverse interests that you have. And so I have a question that you read widely, you travel broadly, you've taught even outside of your own academic specialty, if I'm not mistaken. You've taught a Book of Mormon class, if I'm not mistaken, right, in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so how would you describe the effects of being well-rounded in this way on the soul and on your identity in terms of how it's helped you grow and think in ways that other people might not?
I think that having that kind of a background has helped me to be able to think a little bit outside the box. Maybe not so unidimensional in science and
Hmm.
especially in genetics. Another thing I think that has helped is I can converse with international collaborators. Say I'm on a trip and I'm in Morocco or in Bolivia. Knowing a little bit about the history of the place opens up a avenue of conversation that can kind of you know, loosen the ice a little bit, maybe
Hmm.
make it a little bit easier to get to know the other person on more of a personal level, and not just so that everything isn't just about science, because everybody is multidimensional. And I think it helps that people see that I am not unidimensional. And yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I love that phrase that not, everybody is multidimensional and that to learn in a diverse way helps you connect with other people in a way that you couldn't do otherwise. How have you felt that it has helped you connect with yourself and maybe the different aspects of yourself by broadening your interests and your learning so diversely?
that's a really good question. I just I've always had a broad range of interests. There were points in my life where I could have gone into history or like I said, geography or maybe even meteorology, different areas that have captured my interest. And um, so so I just think I would have been I didn't want to be bored with myself. Is
Hmm.
is that a fair statement?
I'd say
Does
that's a
that
fair
make any
statement.
sense? You
I think
know,
that
you
makes
have
perfect
broad
sense.
interests and you want to feed those interests, and um, it just makes makes it easier to look at the person in the mirror, and makes it easier for me to have interesting conversations with myself in those
Yeah.
moments when there's nobody else to talk to.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. There's a lot of time alone that you spend with yourself over the course of a lifetime. So I have to imagine that's a good thing to be able to be comfortable in your own skin.
I
And,
spend hours on hours in the fall in the car when I'm on seed collecting trips
mm.
and have to do something to stay awake.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I've been on a couple of those with you, just driving along the highway. I must say it's one of the most astounding feats of optical perception, I guess you could say, to be driving along the highway and I'm looking out the window and all of a sudden Rick's stomping on the brakes because he's seen something and we pull over to the side of the road and walk back 100 feet and there's this tiny little Chenopodium weed and that he just boom saw it like that and we turned around to go see it and it's some rare endemic variety and then to kind of show what Rick will do with these is he'll take the seeds back to the BYU greenhouse and grow them and these little plants he'll get DNA sequences from them for sort of phylogenetic research, so how the plants are related one to another in this big genetic tree, and then also for breeding purposes to try and create quinoa varieties in particular with this project that I'm thinking of that are heat tolerant, that are disease resistant, that can grow in places that are commercially viable here in the United States when compared to their ancestral homeland of the Altiplano of South America, where it's consistent temperatures, pretty cool, not a lot of bugs or disease around. So you import that here and it's going to have a hard time because all of a sudden it's humid, it's hot, it's whatever. And so Rick and his team are trying to combat that and all around the world, really. But actually, speaking of the Altiplano, I was wondering if you had any interesting stories because I heard at some point, I can't remember who said this to me, but that you're the Indiana Jones of the plant science department because you've gone so many different places around the world on excursions and I was wondering specifically in that sort of Bolivia, Peru. I know you've been there a lot. What's some crazy experiences that you've had in the past that have been really memorable to you?
One that comes to mind actually happened off the Altiplano. It was in northwestern Argentina.
Mm,
And I was there on a collecting trip with two Argentine scientists back in 2017. And we were leaving the city of Tucumán and driving on the highway. There was a stoplight right at the edge of town. And just as the light turned green and I started going, and out of the corner of my left eye, I saw a flash and I heard a thud. And I immediately stopped the car. This was a rental car. There were four of us in the car. And I noticed there was a girl, maybe an 11 or 12-year-old girl, who was walking holding her hand uh, and out into the front of my car. And I stepped out of the car and I had hit her. Uh, I wasn't going too fast, but just as I was taking off, she stepped in front of my left side view mirror, my driver's side view mirror, and the mirror hit her in the hand. And her hand was already turning red and swelling up, and she was crying. And uh, I I she walked over to the edge of the highway on my right, and I pulled over and walked back, and she walked up to one of the houses there, which was where it turns out was where she was live. And a woman come out, her mom, and I thought her mom was going to start yelling at me and, you know, my poor girl, my poor girl. But she walked up to her daughter and started yelling at her and telling her in Spanish, "You could have gotten killed. How many times have I told you never to do that?" And she looked over at me and she was so apologetic.
whoa.
Here I am. I almost killed her daughter. And it turns out that I think she was fine. She may have sprained some muscles or something, maybe even hairline fractured something in her hand. But fortunately, that was all the damage.
Do you know what she was trying to do? Like, was she just
She
trying to
was just
cross the
trying to cross
street?
the street. She was trying to beat the light.
Oh, man, that is crazy. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
That's a crazy thing to have happen. I'm sure you have
But
some
you never
crazy
know what's
driving
going to
stories in
happen on the,
Morocco too.
yeah, you never know what's going to happen on the Altiplano in Bolivia and Peru. Especially in Bolivia, there's a lot of social and political instability. And people will put up blockades, especially within the big suburb of El Alto, the big suburb of La Paz that's up on the Altiplano.
Mm,
And they can shut down, communication and movement, cars and so forth for days or even weeks.
whoa, dang, that is crazy.
Yeah, fortunately, that's never happened when I've been up there. But
Speaking of crazy experiences and in the sciences and things, I have a question about kind of flipping the coin of how you think that specializing in something has inversely made you more well-rounded. And let me know if this question makes sense. But the thought is that you have, let's say the metaphor is that there's a cave and you go in as deep and you as you can into this one cave, and you get at the other end, and it's as if there's all these other options open to you, like through the journey through this one cave of plant science, phylogeny, whatever. You along the way wind up gaining pieces of other disciplines just because you have to in order to specialize, and that because you specialized, it's made you more disciplined or more focused or something like that. And I was wondering if you could comment on that. Like, has specializing helped develop you as a person in a way that has been good for you or has been difficult to replicate in some other way?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind would be the idea that the more I've traveled with work, the more aware I become of problems in different parts of the world, things that I didn't consider previously, different points of view of different groups of people. The Middle East conflicts look very different from the through the eyes of a Moroccan Arab.
Mm.
Um, uh, uh, the whole sub-Saharan Africa thing, the paradigm of poverty and development, and this the importance and strength of family bonds, the importance of faith in personal life, in overcoming a life that is full of so many cha daily challenges for poor subsistence farm family in a country like Malawi that has endemic uh, poverty, development issues, uh, under under availability of natural sustainable resources. Um, that's made me much more aware of let me just call it the mortal condition, and what our fellow human beings struggle with, and the joys that they can find through what we would consider to be almost hopeless kinds of situations has given me a completely different perspective on my own life, and on the things like the importance of service and the importance of, again, faith, and the the what's the word, the uh, urgency maybe of disseminating knowledge
Hmm.
and disseminating what I consider to be the blessings that we've been given, uh, healthcare and um, food sustainability, monetary sustainability, those kind of things.
Hmm. That's really interesting. I mean, I can see it. Even just from the trips that I have gone on with you, or or even thinking of my mission and the people I came in contact with there. I can definitely empathize with that shift in perspective. And like you're saying, the mortal condition that so many people in the world come in contact with every day, the challenges, it definitely makes me feel like my particular issues of, well, what am I going to do for work, or I want to do these different things. How do I balance everything? It definitely makes them feel more like first world problems. And it's not that they're not problems, and it's not that I don't have to find a way to reconcile everything, but that it's a reminder to be grateful, at the very least, to be grateful for, like you're saying, the blessings of stability and knowledge that we have, and also to know, I think that there is a duty to reach out. Are we our brother's keeper, and to try and do something in this time we have on earth to to strengthen those in need and give them what they need as well.
Yeah, empathy can be a very painful experience. So,
Hmm.
and in a sense, I feel I've grown increasingly to feel that as a follower of Jesus Christ, that it isn't enough for me to cultivate sympathy, but empathy is something that it becomes increasingly important the older that I get. And the more I realize how little empathy I have, it 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 it's pretty humbling to me. And um, you know, I don't know. Empathy can be very, very painful.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I do have a question about empathy. How do you think that gaining empathy through a broad range of experiences and learning, how does that place you more in contact with the divine, with God, and allow you to maybe even become a little bit more like him through that empathy and a piece of what he experiences?
It certainly helped me to appreciate um, to appreciate our Heavenly Father and Jesus. How can they live having a complete understanding of the suffering of humanity? How can that how can they live with that kind of empathetic pain? That's mind-boggling to me. And um, you know, we believe that Jesus Christ felt the all of the pains of humanity uh, in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was performing the atoning sacrifice. And I that's just again incomprehensible to me. And it becomes increasingly so the more I'm exposed to the challenges that of the people that I've worked with directly or indirectly and in some of these very impoverished places.
Hmm. You mentioned that as a scientist, you have had this opportunity to go out into the world and be in touch with people where they are, wherever they are, and how that is sort of, I at least from my point of view, it strengthened religious convictions and strengthened convictions in a loving God and an empathetic God, that He is there with people even in their extreme challenges, if not infirmities, definitely challenges. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to how science and religion may not be so irreconcilably opposed to one another. As so many people tend to think maybe a dogmatic science and a dogmatic religion have some innate tensions, but that it doesn't have to be that way, and that the one feeds into the other and vice versa. I'm really wondering what your thoughts are on that whole concept.
Well, yeah, first of all, dogmatic science is idiocy. It's idiocy because science is self-correcting, and we stand on the shoulders of giants, people that have established paradigms through revolutions in science, discovery of things like the laws of heredity by Gregor Mendel and others. Um, but example, 30 years ago, we laughed at Lamarckianism, the idea that environment can have a lasting impact on phenotype. Okay,
Mhm.
what an organism looks like in the next generation. And since then, we've had a revolution in the area of epigenetics and epigenomics. And we're just scratching the surface in terms of what we understand regarding the not only the immediate impact on gene expression within the lifetime of an individual of things like starvation and extreme drought and cold events and viral infections. Okay. Um, but also the effect of those things on in patterning gene expression for the next generation. So So what we look like in terms of our DNA sequence is not necessarily reflected in our phenotype, in what we look like actually as a physical being. So science is full of those kinds of paradigm shifts, and science is self-correcting. I think we need to recognize, I ironically, most religions at least preach some aspect of humility and as an important divine virtue. Certainly that's the case in Christianity. And yet we have this tendency, I think it's tendency of the natural man, as we say in Latter-day Saint theology. uh, One of the aspects of the natural man is to think that we have to be right, we have to be correct. And there's a lot I think we don't understand about science. And Brigham Young, for example, who for whom our university is named, he stated how many 100 and how many 50, 150, 160 years ago, he made a statement that the idea that Adam was created out of clay is preposterous. Okay. And right there, an early leader of our church distanced ourselves from a literal interpretation of the scriptures, okay, especially a literal interpretation of the Bible. And if as long as we are insistent on treating the Bible as a historical, point by point factual text, as opposed to many parts being allegorical, teaching us important moral and other spiritual lessons, while just like Jesus's parables, while not necessarily being literally uh, an account of somebody's life, be it Adam's or whoever's. um, we're going to have problems if we take the attitude that um, the Bible is literally true word for word. And I'm personally grateful that I have a religious tradition that allows me the liberty to be able to consider these things in the light of emerging knowledge. And of course, we have to weigh that knowledge. We have to be very careful about how we weigh that emerging knowledge. But ultimately, we formally and officially believe that all truth is congruent and uh, will not contradict itself,
Mhm.
because truth is truth. The knowledge of things as they are, as they were, and as they are to come.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, you're in good company saying all of this because this is something that the I guess the co-founder of our channel together, my brother-in-law and I, Barrett, we've had so many conversations just like this. It's like it just doesn't have to be so cut and dried while still being true in a sense that like this is a true book of scripture. This is what I like to say is this is at least a very important symbolic representation of life and how to live life in a very imperfect world. It is at least that. On top of that, it could be historically true, it could not be in any given story through the Bible and what have you. But at the very least, it's worth taking seriously. And then as you try it with faith, it's a sort of a spiritual empiricism almost of trying it out in your life and reading and rereading and pondering and experimenting on the word, that you gain this kind of knowledge. It's more akin to maybe wisdom or like to conocer for the Spanish speakers out there, that it's a embodied knowledge. It's a coming to know something rather than it having to be, like you're saying, a strict line by line dogmatic interpretation and all of the traps that you fall into unnecessarily when you take that road. So I appreciate you saying all these things.
Yeah, because taking that road of like biblical literalism, I mean, that's a recipe for spiritual disaster. So when yeah,
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, it is a recipe for disaster. And like you were saying, as Latter-day Saints, it's not even something that we need to abide by. We don't have the creed of inerrancy. We don't have to abide by the fact that the Bible is true in every jot and tittle, the way that it was written. Of course, it's like at what level of the translation tier do you pin it that, okay, this is how it was written, this is what it really means. It's always a give and take because we're reaching into the past or reaching somewhat into the dark. Even with the most educated of biblical scholars, there's only it's a replication, it's a reimagination of what it was like for these people back then, and you can get really close, but you always have to leave this room for interpretation because there's no way around interpretation. And so to think that a plain reading of scripture means there is no interpretation, it's just another form of interpretation. It doesn't mean that
it
it's not
is.
like with good intent, but it's this
Yeah.
tricky loop that you can get caught in where everything has to be just so because it says so in my Bible. And we don't, as Latter-day Saints, we don't need to, we can have it both ways. It doesn't have to be just this one way.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. I have a couple other questions for you as we're drawing close to our time. What are some of the major projects that you're working on right now? Just for my own curiosity.
Well, we were just awarded a 4-year USDA grant to it's a continuation of what we were doing before, Jake.
Hmm.
Uh, but to expand the number of wide crosses we make for breeding and genomic populations in these are crosses between quinoa and its wild North American ancestor, pitseed goosefoot. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a specialized series of breeding populations called magic populations. And those are just tools to be able to uh, better identify locations in the genome where key genes are. Another thing that we're doing is we've set up with three, potentially up to five South American, Peruvian universities, a network for field testing and using automated tools like drones and so forth to phenotype our breeding populations and advanced lines. Okay, so the Peruvians are interested in this material for a number of different reasons. They're potentially running out of genetic diversity in quinoa for climate change related challenges. Okay.
Ah,
Uh,
I can see
Increasing
that.
disease pressure, the necessity to produce quinoa in the Peruvian coastal desert. Okay. Lower elevations where there's more diseases, more insects, where there's more heat potentially. Okay. Uh, they're they're interested in our material because of the broader genetic base that it contains.
Hmm.
So those are two projects that we'll be focusing on. Um, the other thing, I need to get a handle on genetic variation in wild quinoa down in Mexico. And we have some long-term collaborators there. And uh, uh, we're getting interested now in um, expanding our DNA based phylogenetic analyses to try and understand um, what the ecotype or racial structure of wild quinoa looks like south of the Rio Grande.
Hmm. That's interesting. And now I can't remember, is Wazonle, is that a quinoa? is that in the same species, or is that was that Berlandieri or one of the other species in
It's
the same genus?
Berlandieri, so
Okay.
it's the same biological species, but different taxonomic species.
Okay.
So,
I
and
see.
we're talking not necessarily about the ancestors of Wazontle, um, or not exclusively about the ancestors of Wazontle. We know that Wazontle has a very, very long, um, uh, on a phylogenetic tree, we call it a genetic bottleneck. Okay.
Mhm.
That either it's fairly distant in terms of time from its initial domestication event. And so it's been through many, many, many centuries of selection, or we're just missing that gene pool from our phylogenetic analysis.
Hmm.
So the wild strains from which it was domesticated. So we're trying to kind of piece together that.
Interesting. And for those of you who don't know, guacamole is a very interesting vegetable that's grown in Mexico, and you can often find it at Hispanic food markets. And I remember having it once when it was in season. It was good. I mean, it tastes kind of like broccoli. It's definitely not like strange. Whoa, what's this? It's good. So if you ever get the chance to eat it, then it's worth doing.
Yeah, look in your local Hispanic markets produce section in October or November. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's when it was in season. Well, I have one more question for you. This is a personal question. What would you say to a foolhardy young father like myself who is going back to grad school with kids and trying to make it all work, school, and family? Because I know you've been there. And so I was wondering what you would say to someone like myself who's I'm just getting started again in history and of all the things to study, I know, but I think maybe you can understand the dilemma of diverse interests. But how did you get through it? How can I improve my tack to get through this myself?
I think you just have to have complete support from your spouse, and you've just got to stick with it and be very disciplined about how you spend your money as a family. Make sure you have good insurance, even though
Mhm.
that's expensive, and because you never know what's going to happen. When I was in graduate, well, actually, it was right after. Well, no, when I was in graduate school, I was diagnosed with a congenital um, kidney malformation that I was like a perpetual kidney stone former and had to get that taken care of. And fortunately, my wife had good insurance and that covered me. So otherwise, it could have been a pretty bad situation. And so,
Dang, I had no idea. That's awful. I'm glad you got it
yeah,
taken care
yeah.
of.
So, yeah, I had to have major surgery, get the kidney and the ureter attached to the kidney repaired when I was in the middle of my PhD program.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
and it was like they were cutting across muscles in the side of my abdomen, and I was out of commission for like 3 months.
Dang, I was about to ask, how long were you out? 3 months is a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time. Wow, are we talking like bedridden for 3 months or kind of hobbling around after a month or two?
Uh,
Or
Bedridden for weeks and then hobbling. Yeah,
oh man, that would be really hard.
yeah.
Regardless of having to do a PhD thesis or not, that would be hard. Well, Rick, it's always such a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to the time when you come out looking for Chenopodium latorium again and we can get together, go grab some tacos or something.
It's great to talk to you, Jake. I appreciate the opportunity to join on your podcast.
Yeah, it's small now, but hopefully we can just keep growing and more people can see conversations like this. And if you want to see more conversations like this out there in the audience, subscribe to us today and like and subscribe to the Polysophical Society, and you'll be able to enjoy more interviews and topic-based videos for the Latter-day Saint and the scholar. So thanks again for joining us. Until next
Hey,
time.
thank you, Jake.
Mhm.